tend to vote Obama or socialist, left-wing, liberal. Middle-class Americans, households with earned income between $50,000 and $75,000 were actually more generous than households that earned $100,000 or more. A key factor in charitable giving was religion. So the Chronicle said, religion has a big influence on giving patterns. Regions of the country that are deeply religious are more generous than those that are not. So Utah, with its Mormon population, tops out. Now, although liberal families, sorry, for those who don't know the American terms, those are left-leaning or socialist-leaning. But liberal families' incomes average 6% higher than those of conservative families, so they earn more. Conservative-headed households gave, on average, 30% more to charity than the average liberal-headed household, $1,600 a year versus $1,227. Conservatives also donate more time in voluntary tactics. They also give more blood. Residents of the states that voted for John Kerry in 2004 gave smaller percentages of their incomes to charity than did residents of states that voted for George Bush. Bush carried 24 of the 25 states where charitable giving was above average. In the 10 reddest states in which Bush got more than 60% majorities, the average percentage of personal income donated to charity was 3.5. Residents of the bluest states, the Democrat states, which gave Bush less than 40%, donated just 1.9%. So that's quite considerable. It's quite significant. So people who voted a lot for Bush gave more than about a little under twice those who voted more for Kerry. People who reject the idea that, quote, government has a responsibility to reduce income inequality give an average of 4 times more than people who accept that proposition. So this is very important. The people who reject that the government should help the poor end up helping the poor. I reject the argument that the government should force everyone to go to government schools and force people to pay for government schools where the teachers can't be fired and the educational standards are abysmal, and they're built by the same people who build prisons with fundamentally the same purpose. I reject that the government should run education, and I give all of the knowledge that I've accumulated over 30 years of study away for free. My books are all free. The podcasts are all free. I do ask for donations, which I certainly appreciate, but it's given away for free. It's certainly not a requirement. So if you do stuff for yourself, then you don't need the government to do it. So when people say the government has to do X, most times what they're saying is, I'm not going to, but it kind of needs to be done, right? So if you actually give to the poor, you don't believe in the welfare state in general. And to reinforce the point I made on the show, the single biggest predictor of someone's altruism or generosity is religion. It increasingly correlates with conservative political affiliations because, quote, the percentage of self-described Democrats who say they have no religion has more than quadrupled since the early 1970s, as I mentioned on the show. America is largely divided between religious givers and secular non-givers, and the former, i.e. religious givers, are disproportionately conservative. One demonstration that religion is a strong determinant of charitable behavior is that the least charitable cohort is a relatively small one. Secular conservatives, they are the least charitable. Democrats represent a majority of the wealthiest congressional districts, and half of America's richest households live in states where both senators are Democrats. So again, that's important, and again, I'll put the link for the source of this information in the low bar. Okay, so enough facts. Let me just tell you a little bit. People get kind of confused about what it means to really, really help the poor, and I really want to blow your mind a little bit with, I think, a very important perspective about this. First of all, understand this. If you understand or care about nothing else that I talk about, understand this. The rich are terrified of the poor. The rich are terrified of the poor. Why? The poor are hungry, the poor are ambitious, the poor are motivated, and the poor will work for less. The poor have less overhead than the rich. Once you become some middle-class fart who's got a wife and 2.2 kids and a car in the garage and another one on the way, well, you kind of need, $60,000, $70,000 a year in any reasonably sized metropolis to make ends meet. If you're some poor kid coming out of high school, you're willing to work for a heck of a lot less. And so once people become wealthy, their incomes go up, their expenses go up. And then the capacity they have to lower their income to accept less money goes way down. So think of plumbers who make, 60, 70, 80, or in some places $100,000 or more a year. How long does it take to become a reasonably competent plumber? 6 months of on-the-job training or so? So if you're a plumber making $100,000 a year, some 16-year-old kid who's bored of high school wants to go out and make some money, how much is he going to accept and be happy to make as apprenticing and then becoming a plumber? Well, a heck of a lot less than $100,000. So the middle class and the rich are really scared of the poor because they're in a free market. There's a constant churning. The poor become wealthy, the wealthy get lazy, the wealthy get incompetent at parenting and don't instill the same work ethic. It used to be called shirt sleeves to shirts to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. You start off as a manual laborer, you become middle class, your kids are lazy and blow all the money. This used to be a lot of social churning in the free market, or the more free market America. That's to some degree diminished, largely as a result of Federal Reserve bubbles and busts, which disproportionately move income up to the financially skilled and politically connected sections of society and leave the poor more destitute. But that's the result of the state and its predation using fiat currency and inflation rather than the free market. But the rich are terrified of the poor. And there's 2 basic ways that the rich keep the poor at bay, keep the poor from competing with them. The first is through licensing and regulations and overcomplicated tax codes and corporate charters and trust funds and all of the polysyllabic accountant-laced gobbledygook that spiderwebs the brains of the less financially literate. And so the plumbers want to make licenses and they want to be big unions and to keep the people out, and it takes years to become a plumber now, and you got to apprentice until your brain rots off from reality TV-induced style abortion, mental distortion and laziness and so on. Sorry, no, I didn't mean to say abortion. So they use licenses to keep people out, and they use trade restrictions to keep people out, and they use tariffs to keep people out. And that way, once you become wealthy in the trades, or at least middle class in the trades, you've got to keep the poor and the young and the ambitious out of your market. Otherwise, it drives the price down and makes it harder for you to compete. So you use licenses and restrictions and all that kind of stuff to keep the poor at bay. That's sort of number one. Number two, if you are a very smart intellectual, what you do, if you're rich and you want to keep the poor out of the marketplace, is you tell them something like this. Oh, you poor, 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 poor people. What a shame. I mean, the system is rigged. You'll never be able to get ahead. Poverty is your destiny. Poverty is your tragedy. Poverty is your fly-in-amber trapped circumstance of revolving door hysterical inevitability. You can never get out. Sucks to be you. Here's a little bit of money. Well, it's not your fault, and you can't get out. And your willpower means nothing because, you see, the game is rigged against you. Can't get out. Poor, 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 poor people. Here's an Xbox. Well, that's how you keep the poor from competing, is you tell them that they haven't got a chance. You keep them out of the marketplace by building their resentment, by stoking class warfare, which the Democrats, of course, are very, very good at. And that way, the poor don't develop friendly human capital. In other words, how to win friends and influence people, how to be kind and effective and useful and positive and enthusiastic. And you make the poor cynical